What happened to you? Is an analysis of how traumatic experiences affect our brains throughout our lives, showing how they change our coping mechanisms, and why we must consider both the individual and collective side of mental health if we are to resolve our emotional challenges not just for ourselves but for society at large. Have you ever wondered why you react in a certain way to some situations? Or why you can't kick a bad habit? Instead of asking ourselves, "What's wrong with me?" we should shift the question to "What happened to me?" Trauma is difficult to address, but it can affect us for years. Experiencing abuse or neglect as a child can change how we respond to stress as an adult, for example. In What Happened to You? Conversations on trauma, resilience, and healing, Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey explore why and how trauma might be influencing our behavior. Oprah herself is a trauma survivor. This book is about addressing it head-on and learning to heal. Here are 3 of the most insightful lessons from this book. What we experience during childhood has a profound effect on our brain as an adult. We can learn positive regulation strategies later in life to help us deal with trauma. It is possible to overcome trauma with the right support. Let's get right into these lessons and learn from Oprah. Lesson 1. Our brains are uniquely shaped by the experiences that we have during childhood. Early on in Oprah's life, she remembers feeling intensely lonely. She knew that she wasn't wanted. Her mom was only a teenager when she had her, and she didn't have the resources to care for her adequately. Most of her childhood was spent with various family members, many of whom neglected and beat Oprah regularly. These early experiences shaped how she saw the world as well as herself because experiences like this literally change the brain. A baby's brain develops at a rate of 20,000 new neurons per second. Every single experience a child has is logged in a personal codebook in the brain. Later on, these experiences can manifest themselves but cannot be understood in a rational way. An example of this is a child the authors called Sam. Sam was physically abused by his father and was removed by Child Protective Services. Once Sam moved into a group home and received the support he needed, he was doing well and progressing. However, once he got a new teacher, he started acting out at school. Everyone was puzzled as to why until Dr. Perry met Sam's father. He wore a strong Old Spice cologne, the very same scent Sam's teacher wore. Suddenly it clicked, the aroma of the cologne was triggering old, terrifying memories for Sam. Once the teacher changed the cologne, the behavior stopped. If we want to understand trauma, we need to ask, what happened to you, specifically when you were very young? Lesson 2. Learning regulation strategies can help you heal from trauma. Early in her career as a journalist, Oprah often worked 100-hour weeks and was always exhausted. She ignored the signals her body sent to tell her something was wrong. Why? The abuse in her past had trained her to be a people pleaser. This meant ignoring her own boundaries and working to meet everyone else's needs. Instead, she turned to food for comfort. What helps us not ignore the signals when we're out of balance? Positive regulation strategies. Everyone's brain has a self-regulation system of core regulatory networks, or CRNs for short. Their purpose is to keep us balanced. When a caregiver responds consistently to a baby's needs, his CRNs become resilient, and a child becomes able to regulate himself as he becomes older. But if the caregivers are neglectful or abusive, the child's CRNs become impaired, also known as dysregulated. This makes the child's stress responses become sensitized, meaning he will always be looking out for threats and panic easily. Neglectful caregivers make a child associate people with disappointment, meaning they struggle to build and maintain human connections. Lesson 3. With the right support, we can overcome the traumatic experiences of our past. Did you know that almost half of all children living in the US have had some sort of serious traumatic experience in their life? For adults, 60% report experiencing at least one traumatic incident. We know how these affect the brain, but now imagine the effect these experiences have on our larger communities when so many of us have had trauma. So many of us are living with sensitized stress responses. Is it really any wonder we see people act out in violence or intolerance? Should we be surprised when adults are unable to teach their children how to regulate themselves? People like to think that kids are resilient and can recover from trauma and abuse, but this simply isn't the case. They are still affected by trauma, even if you can't see it. This type of stress can mean they might have trouble focusing, or their health might deteriorate. What these kids need is support. Not just immediately after the trauma, but even into their adulthood. They need support from professionals who understand a traumatized brain. But perhaps most important of all is that they need support from the communities around them. All of us need support from the people around us to heal. Schools, workplaces, and even places of worship need to help the people around them who have survived trauma. With the right support, we can learn how to heal and help others do the same.